This is the Morning Blitz. I'm Rick Corey, and it's time for us to be joined by Tim Gilpin. He's sitting here just to my right. He is the former Assistant Attorney General for the state of Oklahoma, and he is an attorney. Tim, thanks for taking the time to actually come in the studio. You guys don't office far away, though, do you?
No, not too far at all.
So you had to walk across Guthrie Green. Nice out there tonight, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great out there. Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate you doing this. When I got a hold of you, we started talking about the name, image, likeness thing, and then you started doing a little extra research into it for me. There is a legal aspect of this because obviously it has to be done correctly, but now because of the new NCAA rules, it can. When you start breaking this down and looking into it, is there something that surprises you about this, or is it just eye-opening?
Well, think about it like this. This is the biggest change in college sports in decades. This is allowing the players to monetize their persona, what we're going to call name, image, likeness, or NIL from a legal perspective. So you're going to be able to see your favorite college athlete in local and national ads now. So the Supreme Court comes down with this decision just in late June of this summer that says, hey, okay, the NCAA is not going to be exempt from the antitrust laws, but they narrowed it to what they called educational benefits. Now, that was a 9-0 decision, so everybody knows this is strong. This is going to happen. Now, Justice Kavanaugh, right, Brett Kavanaugh, had a concurring opinion, and he went all out and said, look, this decision is narrow only because of the legal technicalities that applied to it. I think, he says, it'll apply to everything. So that put the NCAA in an awkward position, right? They're in a bind. They've got to quickly come up with rules to deal with this NIL stuff. So they do. And that's what's going to be the wild, wild west here coming up. And that also left the states, think about it, the legislatures in all these states with big school programs to quickly come through with what they want their laws to be so their universities are competitive. And Oklahoma did the same. Then they put it on the schools. And think of our big schools, right, our big athletic schools, to come up with their rules based on that. So that's what's going on right now. Everybody's scrambling.
And that's the part that still makes me kind of shake my head. So there's a ruling, and it starts with antitrust. And just for those who aren't sure, explain that. What does that mean?
Sure. It means that there is a type of business or industry that has a monopoly. They're going to be able to control all across the board on horizon. They call it horizon across the board to control prices and salaries and everything that goes with it. So they finally applied it to the NCAA and said, hey, okay, you've got what amounts to a monopoly on college sports. So you're going to have to abide by the antitrust laws.
Okay, so that starts the whole ruling on the way down. The thing that gets me is everybody just keeps saying below you make your rule, you make your rule, you make your rule. That means it doesn't necessarily, it's not going to be done state by state around the country the same way. But it does make you think that an Oklahoma wants to do it the same way Alabama does because you want the Sooners or the Cowboys to have the same benefits that they have for the Crimson Tide or Auburn. Those kinds of things. That part to me is interesting. Are you surprised by that, or is that the way it would always go, Tim?
Well, think about it this way. The NCAA wants Congress to step in and come up with a national and federal legislation to make it uniform. And Congress is Congress, right? That's going to take time. That's going to be politics, and that's going to be a mess. So that hasn't happened, and it's probably not going to happen anytime soon. So 50 states coming up with an idea or a program for their state, and they're each going to be trying to be, they're legislators, they're state legislators. They're going to try to make it competitive for their schools against Oklahoma, Texas, and Colorado. So that's what's going on. But the NCAA goes ahead and says, okay, well, here are the general rules, which is what you and I think of as the rules. And our universities, for the most part, have adopted those same rules.
Okay. So as you said, Wild Wild West. In your opinion, what makes it Wild Wild West?
Well, think of it like this. These student athletes are no longer prohibited from the ability to make money and business ventures from their image, their name, ads, promotions. So what we're looking at is no pay for play, right? Schools cannot pay them to play. Boosters cannot pay them to be at a particular event based upon performance, something like that. They cannot accept, or they can accept money from businesses in exchange for features and ads or products. And really, what's going to hit big time is these college athletes can now have agents. So, but the agents are limited too. I mean, this is just really moving around and all the different pieces on the board. Yeah. The agents can be signed up only for their college performance. They can't sign them up for like a period of time that goes beyond their college years. Like, hey, I want you to also represent me in pro life. So, and then, the schools can't arrange for the deals, but the schools are going to arrange for programs to help teach the kids, the young people, how to deal with brand performance, brand development. So it's kind of like this weird sort of they can, they can't, where's the line in the sand? The student athletes have to disclose these contracts within 72 hours, or get this, if they have a game coming up before the next game performance they're going to participate in. So there's just a lot to learn here.
Okay, there are this. So they have to tell you. So they have to tell 72 hours after.
Yeah.
They have the deal.
Yeah.
Well, that makes some sense, but you want to make sure everybody's out front because you don't want to see something happen later on and wonder whether or not it's there. The agents thing has been somewhat overlooked, and I don't know that I have heard. Scott, have you heard of anybody just jumping into agents? I'm sure somebody has one, but have you heard of it?
Doesn't Rattler have representation?
I would imagine they all do, but I just haven't heard names or anything. So I guess these guys are staying kind of behind the boards. But I wonder, are those agents basically, do you think, Tim, are those agents going to go out and contact people, or are they just to handle the things that come into them, or just to help them make decisions?
Well, they're agents. They can be lawyers. They can be they're professionals. That's what they do. They're going to be the folks who handle these student athletes' NIL. And so they can go look for it. They can accept the deals. But again, only for college deals. They can't be contracted beyond that.
But they could be. Then that kid could come back after his college career is over and say, okay, now I want to sign a new deal with you to be my guy going forward, right?
Let's think creatively, right? I mean, who knows? I mean, if I'm a good college athlete and I want to sign up an agent, and the agent wants me, I can only sign him up for the time I'm at, for instance, at OU or OSU. Sure. It can't go beyond that.
Tim Gilpin is with us, former assistant AG here in Oklahoma, and we're talking about the NIL deals, name, image, likeness. And you mentioned they call these educational benefits at some point, which makes me laugh since there's I guess it's going to make you in a better mood when you go to class. That might do it. As you went through this, what was the most surprising thing to you? Was the 9-0 vote surprising? Because you get the Supreme Court on the same goal for everything. It's a very unusual deal.
Well, the Supreme Court's just the beginning. The Supreme Court in the Alston decision, which we think of, came out on June 21st of this summer, was 9-0. So they were clear that what the NCAA has been doing, they don't agree with. They're not going to allow it. But the technical decision was only narrowly drawn because of how the appeal was brought up to the court, only on educational benefits. But because it was 9-0, it was unanimous, which is very unusual with this Supreme Court. And then Kavanaugh's concurring opinion that just was several pages of saying he thinks basically this is going to apply to everything to do with these student athletes. So that put the NCAA in a bind. They realized they saw the train light coming toward them, right?
Right.
So they're out there quickly coming up with these rules, and they call them, get this, they're temporary rules. So they're literally they're trying to build this plane as they're flying it.
That's a good way to put that. So they're just going to try to keep it in the air without crashing. As we move forward, it's going to be hard to imagine that the bigger schools aren't going to have more impact than the smaller schools. And the other thing is, is this just for state schools? Or does this go across the board?
Anybody who's in that athletic association. But you asked what really is a little bit surprising. Boosters, look for this. What can boosters do or not? Because every big college program, or even some of the smaller ones, have their dedicated boosters who have the resources and the money. Boosters cannot pay, or they can't offer something to recruit, right? So like Gilpin Law cannot go out and say, you're a terrific high school player, and it'd be wonderful to have you as an office clerk that makes more money than any other office clerk in the world, right? Yeah. But I really would like you to go to OU, TU, OSU. Can't do that. But I can offer them a position and say, that's wonderful that you are going, but this isn't because you're going. And I cannot say, I'll give you a pay raise if you do a really great job in the game against filling the opponent.
Gotcha. All right, that doesn't make sense. That goes back to the old stories of keeping alligators out of the gym and paying guys to do that, right, kind of thing. Scott, you had a question?
Yeah, I was reading up on this a little bit last night, and I saw that the National Labor Relations Board is starting to get involved in that. Mm-hmm. What is that going to look like once they get involved?
Boy, your guess is as good as anybody else's. The National Labor Relations Board has to deal with a lot of labor issues, obviously, and it's just going to be, like I said, Wild West right now. You're going to see a lot of smart lawyers, a lot of smart agents get in this. My biggest concern from just a practical perspective is what's the impact on the mindset of these young athletes.
Before you go into that, and I think that's important to get into, what could the National Labor Relations Board do? What would they generally be looking at in a situation like this, Tim, legally?
Well, I mean, they regulate labor relations, so they're going to look at who's employing who, under what circumstances, under what rules. So another layer of rules potentially. And then eventually another court decision as to how it applies or how it's not going to apply. So great question. The answer is nobody knows yet.
Something else you mentioned before we get into the mindset is, the NCAA may be close to going away. I mean, we're hearing a lot about that the NCAA, their power has been taken away from them more and more and more. And you're right, they were the king cat daddy for a long time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, when that happens, this ruling literally doesn't change. At least I wouldn't think so, because they're just saying, well, or does it? Because they're saying the NCAA itself was the one who had the monopoly. If they cease to exist, what happens to this?
Boy, then you're left with the universities and the state legislatures, and I tell you, that's going to be a mess.
Oh, that sounds fun. Yeah, that's great. You can't have anybody at a university saying, I want more than the other guy. And let's address, and again, this is Tim Gilpin, former assistant AG, an attorney here in Tulsa now. You've mentioned the mindset. I'm sure there are people out there that say, well, Spencer Rattler didn't play as well early on because he's got all these NIL deals or whatever. And I do wonder about that. And did the court write anything about any of that kind of thing? I wouldn't think so, because it's legal. But when you get into it, why did you come up with that concern as you were doing your research?
Well, the court's looking at the legal issues. Some of the Justice Kavanaugh talked a lot about the athletes and the impact upon them just from a legal perspective, in the sense that they're playing and they deserve part of this, right? I mean, think about billions of dollars. We're talking about billions of dollars here. But when you read through all of this, when you digest it, and there's a lot, you got to imagine, how is this going to impact a young mind that's between what? You get recruited when you're 16, 17, 18, and then you play for how many years? The pressure that's on you to be a top-notch athlete, the pressure to train, the pressure to perform. On top of that, now money, an agent, deals, performances. You're attending events, you're in ads. I mean, I thought I knew everything when I was 18 to 21, but life takes it out of you, and you realize pretty quick.
The other thing is, and you make a great point here, there are extra expectations. So now if you're ex-player and you've been in this many ads, or somebody's giving, you're paying you to do certain things and you don't play well, and he's got a scheduled appearance, and you go out there and you wonder about, do they say something about it, that kind of thing? It could have a huge impact on him, couldn't it?
Well, just the scheduling alone, think about it. Yeah. Just the emotional impact and the dealing with it. But there's also an interesting rule here at our universities in Oklahoma, and I'm sure elsewhere, that you can't miss class or any academic obligations for NIL. Yeah. So you're not cutting class to go cut that ad.
All right.
In theory.
When you got into Oklahoma's portion of this, is it a lot like most other states, do you think? I mean, I know you can't read every state. Or was there anything in Oklahoma's that you got into and thought, that's really different, right? Or that could surprise me?
Not so much. I mean, it looks like they're all looking at the NCAA rules, their temporary rules. I emphasize temporary so far. And that they're modeling them after that. No money for performance, no money for attendance at the school specifically. Boosters obviously are able to hire these kids, these young people, and have them work for them. Agents, that's a huge deal. Oh, the agent has to be licensed in Oklahoma.
Right.
So, that's not a big deal, though. Oh, international students. Think about your different sports that were recruiting folks from overseas.
Right.
That's going to be a mess because, remember, they're on a special visa. If you're an international student, an F1 visa, which means you can't make money here. So we bring somebody over from name your country that has a good player, and they want to take advantage of this. They cannot. But when you dig into it, they can go home and make money. So wherever home is, you can go home and do cut ads or whatever. But when you're here, because of your visa, F1 visa, you can't earn a living.
And you might not think of that as something that would happen a lot, but think about some of these ridiculously good Australian punters.
Right.
right? Because some of these kids make a living, but you can't do that here. Now,
And he was one of the ones complaining about it.
oh, is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right. So if you become a naturalized citizen, I guess you could then, right?
Yeah, but that's a whole process that can last years.
Right. Well, but that mean this is simple. All right, I got it. We all go adopt an Australian punter. Right? Then he can make the money. We get some of it for being the sweet daddy on this whole thing.
Somebody is filling out the paperwork right now.
I think I just figured it out. Everybody pick an Australian punter and let's go. This isn't that hard. Tim, you said Wild West. Just looking into this and your experience in law, where are we headed?
Where we're headed is that these young athletes are going to be making money, and we're going to see them on TV locally and nationally, and we're going to have to work it out as far as how that impacts their performance on the field. Legally, where we're headed is money, agents, more legislation, and more rules.
Yeah, that's the legislation and rules is what I was getting into. I mean, in the history of as these kinds of things have happened, what have you seen happen? Does it become an absolute mess, or you think these rules will eventually settle into like everybody by every state has to play by the same set?
These state legislators are just as dedicated to their school athletic programs as you and I are, right? If not more so. They bring in money. So they're out there looking at, like Oklahoma's looking at Texas, Texas is looking at Oklahoma, and Nebraska's got to be out there somewhere, right?
Sure.
And they're looking at how we're running our rules and what our legislature's doing. Oklahoma, interestingly enough, the governor signed the bill on May 1st. It only becomes effective, now get this, July of 2023. So why would they do that? They said by July of 2023, you have to have these rules, but the schools are able to make the rules up to that date. So they're trying to push them as hard as possible to come up with their variety of rules to remain competitive. So OU, OSU, TU, and our other programs are all out there trying to develop these rules so that the players want to come here.
Right. That makes some sense, too.
And looking at other schools and comparing and contrasting.
Right. So in past decisions and closing moments with Tim Gilpin, he's a former assistant AG here in Oklahoma and a Tulsa attorney. We're talking about the NIL deals and kind of the overall, I mean, we all kind of know what it is, but there's more that Tim's gotten into today. But then the overall effect of this, in the past during antitrust type suits, and we very famous ones before, have those organizations like the NCAA or whoever, have they been able to kind of bounce back, restructure themselves, or is that generally the beginning of the end, Tim?
No, I think they'll bounce back. I think they're going to be the new version of the NFL and all that.
All right, so they'll figure it out and they'll move forward from there, but they'll have to share the cash.
There's too much money for them not to figure it out.
Yeah, and even a small slice of everything is not bad, right?
Right,
Which
exactly.
I guess is where we're going.
I'll bet they'll still get a big slice.
Oh yeah, and then TV money has got to play into this at some point. I find it really interesting how some schools have done this. Like I know I was told I'm not that at A&M they assigned a couple of players and they're paying them I think it's six figures to be you're going to be the guys that go out in front to do certain interviews. And so the schools, I guess, make deals with them or somebody made deals with them to do that. So the various branches of how you can assess this is going to be a little bit everywhere. It won't just be Spencer Rattler driving home a new Dodge. There are a lot of ways to figure it out.
But remember, the schools can't give them directly money.
Right.
The schools can't.
Right.
So, but what you're going to see is those schools develop programs to, quote unquote, teach and help the student athletes deal with the branding and agents and such. So that's where the gray area will come in because the school will want to promote the idea that they'll help you deal with this. They'll teach you how to brand. They'll teach you how to deal with NIL.
And will they teach them how to handle the money?
I think so. That's the way I read it.
All right. Scott?
Yeah, that was going to be my question. There is going to be a lot of money changing hands here. Are there any protections built in for the players, or are they just kind of on their own, maybe getting a little guidance from the schools?
As I read this, and I've looked over a fair amount of it, is the schools are just kind of picking it up saying, we will run workshops to help the students cope with it. But that's like saying to an NFL player, the team's going to help you deal with your multi-millions of dollars. There's a lot going on in that young person's head.
Yeah, and then once they get that, I mean, you mentioned the agents. The agents hopefully will help them be smart about that too, and put some of that away.
Remember, it's just how good an agent they get, because it's money, it's greed, it's what's going on. So it'll be on the student, and hopefully them and their families will be able to hire the right agent who not only deals with the profitability, but how it impacts the player, their life, and their performance. Because for a lot of them, performance is life.
Oh yeah, it certainly is. And you know, I do think a lot of us also think about the fact that there are kids who are really good in college who make, you know, let's go back to Brennan Marion. Brennan Marion led the NCAA in receiving at Tulsa. He set and still holds the all-time record for yards per reception. He injured his knee on one of the last plays of his senior season. Brennan Marion was going to play in the NFL. Dan Bitson, the car accident. Dan was going to have a chance to play in the NFL. Those guys could have made some money during their college career at that time and at least have that pay off for them, and all those jerseys people were with their names on it. So from one standpoint, Tim, I think this is a really good idea. I think we just have to figure out how we do it.
Oh, yeah, think about that. And those kids still would have the opportunity to make money so they can go on with life despite the injury. It's just a matter of temporary rules right now at the NCAA. Universities coming up with their rules, throw in the state politicians of the legislatures, and at some point, throw in the legislators at the federal level, and I think we'll have to talk about this for a long time to come.
You know what you just described is, thank God it's Halloween, a big witch's pot, and we just threw all those people in there, and there's just somebody with a crooked nose standing up stirring, right?
And everybody trying to dip their hands in and get a piece of
everybody wants to stick their face in their straw in.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, thanks for doing the research and jumping in on this thing, and I want to see if we can all keep up with it and maybe get some expertise from you as things change.
I'm glad to do it.
All right,
congratulations on the show.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun. And they pay me to do this. Shh, don't tell them I'm having a great time. Yeah, all right, it's 7 o'clock. This is the Morning Blitz. I'm Rick Corey. That is Scott File. That is Tim Gilpin. We'll be right back. When we come back, we're going to be talking in about 10 minutes to a 7-year-old who's going to break down OU Kansas State. Oh, you're going to want to hear this. This kid knows what he's talking about. Trenton Kirk has still to come right here on the Morning Blitz.
This podcast is powered by the law offices of John M. Dunn.